Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez had submitted 7 combat deployment requests in 18 months, each one denied with the same cold response from Colonel Richard Blake. The remote forward operating base in northern Afghanistan had become her prison rather than her post. Trapped behind logistics desks while her fellow Marines faced the dangers she had trained to confront. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Maya stared at the latest rejection notice on her tablet, the official military letterhead adorned with the same dismissive language as all the others. Request denied due to current operational requirements. The words felt like a personal attack rather than a bureaucratic formality. Outside her window, the harsh Afghan mountains stood silent witness to her growing frustration, their jagged peaks mirroring the obstacles in her path. While other female Marines were slowly breaking barriers in combat roles across the theater, Maya remained confined to the operations center, her combat training and tactical expertise wasted on supply chains and personnel rotations. Her service record was exemplary, her qualifications unquestionable, her combat readiness scores consistently at the top of her unit. But she possessed something that made certain superior officers uncomfortable, the quiet confidence of a woman. Who knew combat operations better than those denying her the opportunity to prove it? The first warning sign had come during a routine tactical briefing 3 months earlier. Colonel Blake stood at the front of the operations center, his uniform immaculate but his eyes cold as the mountain winter. Forward combat operations remain restricted to designated personnel only, he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who enjoyed wielding power. All deployment rosters have been finalized for the quarter. Maya raised her hand respectfully. Sir, the 3rd Platoon is undermanned for their reconnaissance mission in the Eastern Valley. I've completed advanced recon training and could support their operation. Did I ask for volunteers, Staff Sergeant? Blake's voice cut through the room like a blade. The deployment rosters are not open for discussion. The room fell silent. Maya nodded once, maintaining her composure despite the public dismissal, but she caught the uncomfortable glances exchanged between other Marines. The way Sergeant James Martinez shifted uneasily in his seat. Blake's denial made no tactical sense, served no operational purpose, and seemed designed primarily to assert dominance over a Marine who had dared to question his authority. After the briefing, James approached her quietly. That was unnecessary, Rodriguez. Everyone knows. You're more qualified than half the recon team. Maya appreciated his support, but kept her response professional. We follow orders, Sergeant. That's what we do. But that night, alone in her quarters, Maya stared at the ceiling and wondered why excellence had become a liability. She had spent 8 years earning respect through discipline and dedication. 8 years proving herself in a system that still viewed female Marines with skepticism. 8 years perfecting her combat skills while watching less qualified male counterparts receive the deployment she was denied. Now she felt like a target in crosshairs she couldn't see. The situation deteriorated in the weeks that followed. Maya's responsibilities were gradually restricted, her tactical input ignored during planning sessions, her recommendations dismissed without consideration. She worked longer hours trying to prove her value to a command that seemed determined to minimize her contributions. The second warning came during a late-night equipment inspection. Maya was reviewing weapon systems when Colonel Blake appeared. In the armory, his expression predatory under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Working late again, Rodriguez. His tone carried implications she didn't like. Ensuring combat readiness, sir. The 3rd Platoon needs these systems operational for tomorrow's mission. Blake stepped closer, invading her personal space. You. No, some Marines understand the importance of following established protocols. Others seem to think they know better than their commanding officers. Maya maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. I'm focused on mission success, sir. That's always been my priority. Mission success, Blake repeated, his voice dripping with false concern. Interesting perspective from someone who seems to question every deployment decision I make. The conversation felt like a trap, each word carefully chosen to corner her. Maya had encountered officers like Blake before, men who viewed female competence as a threat to their authority and mistook professional dedication for defiance. She knew that any response would be twisted, any silence interpreted as admission. Of guilt, I follow orders, sir, she said simply. Blake smiled, but it never reached his eyes. We'll see about that, Staff Sergeant, we'll see. As he walked away, Maya felt the weight of impending disaster settling around her like fog. She had done nothing wrong except desire to serve in the capacity she had trained for. But in Blake's command, that might be offense enough. Excellence had become her enemy, and she was about to discover just how far some officers would go to eliminate threats to their authority. The storm was coming, and Maya Rodriguez was standing directly in its path, armed with nothing but her integrity and the hope that truth would somehow be enough to weather what was about to unfold. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The rumors started 3 weeks later, spreading through the base like wildfire in dry timber. Maya first heard whispers during morning chow, fragments of conversation that made her blood run cold. Someone requesting unauthorized deployments, circumventing command structure. Investigation ongoing. She found Sergeant Martinez in the communications bay, his face grim as he pretended to focus on radio equipment. James, what's the word among the troops? Martinez glanced around nervously before speaking in low tones. Someone's been feeding information to Colonel Blake. Stories about you trying to get yourself assigned to combat patrols without authorization. Going outside the chain of command. All pointing back to you. Maya felt the ground shift beneath her feet, though she knew the concrete floor was solid. What kind of stories? The kind that end careers, Martinez said quietly. Maya, everyone who knows you knows it's garbage. But Blake has the battalion commander's ear, and he's painting a picture of insubordination and disregard for protocol. The pieces began falling into place. Blake's increased scrutiny, the reduced responsibilities, the late-night confrontations. He had been building a case against her, manufacturing evidence of insubordination where none existed. Have you seen any actual documentation? Maya asked. Martinez shook his head. That's the problem. It's all verbal reports, hearsay, and unofficial complaints. Nothing you can challenge directly, but enough to create doubt. Maya spent the next day reviewing every request she had submitted, every protocol she had followed, every report she had filed. Her record was spotless, her procedures textbook perfect, her combat readiness evaluations among the highest in the battalion. But she was learning that facts mattered less than perception, especially when someone with authority was determined to shape that perception. Lieutenant Sarah Collins, one of the few female officers on base, approached Maya during evening patrol. Staff Sergeant, I need to tell you something. Colonel Blake called me into his office yesterday. He asked questions about your attitude, your respect for the chain of command, whether you'd ever tried to circumvent deployment protocols. Maya's heart sank. What did you tell him? The truth. That you're the most professional Marine I've ever served with. That you've never stepped outside proper channels. Colin's voice trembled slightly. But he kept pushing, suggesting that maybe I hadn't noticed things, that perhaps I was being too loyal to see problems. The systematic nature of Blake's campaign became clear. He was interviewing her colleagues, planting seeds of doubt, creating a narrative of insubordination that would justify whatever action he planned to take. That night, Maya called her former platoon leader, Captain Michael Sanchez, who had transferred to Camp Leoing 6 months earlier. The conversation was brief but illuminating. "Maya, be careful," Michael warned. "Blake has a reputation for eliminating Marines he perceives as threats. He's methodical, patient, and ruthless. If he's targeting you, it's because he sees something in you that threatens his authority." "But I've done nothing wrong, Captain. My record is clean." "That's exactly the problem," Michael said sadly. "Excellence makes insecure officers nervous. They'd rather have mediocrity they can control than excellence they can't." The next morning brought the first formal accusation. Maya was summoned to Blake's office, where he sat behind his desk with a file folder and a satisfied expression. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, I've received concerning reports about your attempts to circumvent the deployment approval process. Multiple sources indicate you've been trying to get yourself assigned to combat operations outside proper channels." Maya maintained her composure. "Sir, I'd like to review those reports and provide documentation of my adherence to all proper protocols." Blake's smile was cold. "This isn't a negotiation, Rodriguez. It's a notification. You're being placed under administrative review pending a full investigation." The words hit like physical blows. Administrative review meant restriction to base, isolation from her unit, and a black mark that would follow her regardless of the outcome. "Sir, I request the opportunity to present evidence in my defense." "You'll have that opportunity through proper channels," Blake replied dismissively. "Until then, you're restricted to base operations. No tactical planning, no equipment preparation, no communication with deployed units." As Maya left Blake's office, she felt the weight of injustice settling on her shoulders. She had served with distinction for 8 years, had earned the respect of peers throughout the corps, had prepared herself for combat roles that were finally opening to female Marines. Now she was being destroyed by lies and innuendo, her career hanging by threads that Blake was systematically cutting. But as she walked through the base, Maya noticed something that gave her hope. The looks from other Marines weren't judgmental or suspicious. They were sympathetic, angry, and supportive. Sergeant Martinez nodded respectfully as she passed. "Lieutenant." Collins offered a subtle thumbs up. Even Marines who barely knew her seemed to understand that something unfair was happening. Blake might have the authority to destroy her career, but he couldn't erase the relationship she had built or the respect she had earned. The storm was intensifying, but Maya Rodriguez was not facing it alone. The investigation was a sham from the beginning. Maya sat in a sterile conference room while Blake presented his case to Lieutenant Colonel William Harrison, the base commander. The evidence was circumstantial, the witnesses coached, and the conclusions predetermined. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has consistently attempted to circumvent established deployment protocols, Blake declared, his voice carrying false authority. Multiple personnel have reported her attempting to get herself assigned to combat operations without proper authorization. Maya listened to her character being systematically destroyed by carefully crafted lies. Every request she had made was twisted. Every protocol she had followed was reinterpreted as insubordination. Every commendation was dismissed as favoritism rather than earned recognition. "Permission to respond, sir?" Maya asked Lieutenant Colonel Harrison. Harrison, a man she had respected for his fairness, barely looked at her. "The investigation is ongoing, Staff Sergeant. You will have opportunity to provide input through proper channels." The dismissal stung worse than Blake's accusations. Harrison had seen her work, had commended her performance, had relied on her expertise during critical operations. Now he was treating her like a stranger, a problem to be solved rather than a Marine to be protected. After the meeting, Maya returned to her quarters to find her personal effects being searched by military police personnel. Her computer had been confiscated, her files examined, her privacy violated in service of Blake's vendetta. Sergeant Martinez found her there an hour later, his face angry and frustrated. "This is wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong. The squad leaders are talking about filing a complaint with the Inspector General. Maya shook her head. James, I appreciate the loyalty, but I won't have good Marines destroying their careers for me. Blake is too well connected, too powerful. But Maya, you're one of the best Marines on this base. You've created training protocols that have saved lives, improved operational efficiency, prepared countless Marines for combat deployment. How can they do this to you? Maya looked out the window at the harsh Afghan mountains. Because competence threatens incompetence, James. Because some officers would rather eliminate excellence than be challenged by it. The final blow came. 3 days later, Maya was ordered to appear before Lieutenant Colonel Harrison for what Blake called a career counseling session. The meeting was brief, brutal, and final. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the investigation has revealed serious concerns about your respect for the chain of command, Harrison announced, his voice devoid of emotion. Effective immediately, you're being transferred to the logistics base at Bagram. Maya felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Bagram was even further from combat operations, a massive support facility where she would be buried in administrative work, her combat training and tactical expertise completely wasted. Sir, I request a formal hearing. I want the opportunity to defend myself with evidence and witnesses. That won't be necessary, Blake injected smoothly. The Marine Corps doesn't need the embarrassment of a public proceeding. Accept the transfer gracefully, and your service record will remain officially clean. The threat was clear. Accept exile or face total destruction. Maya realized she was trapped in a system designed to protect officers like Blake while sacrificing Marines like herself. When do I leave? She asked quietly. Tomorrow morning, Harrison replied. Pack your personal effects. A convoy will transfer you to the airfield. That night, Maya sat in her quarters writing letters she would never send. Letters to junior Marines who deserved better leadership. Letters to NCOs who had trusted her judgment. Letters to a system that had failed to protect integrity while rewarding corruption. She thought about fighting back, about making noise, about refusing to go quietly. But she also thought about the young Marines who looked up to her, the enlisted personnel who depended on her example, the principles she had sworn to uphold. Sometimes dignity meant accepting injustice with grace, maintaining honor even when honor wasn't rewarded. Sometimes the most powerful protest was refusing to let corruption change who you were. Maya Rodriguez would leave the forward operating base with her integrity intact, her conscience clear, and her head held high. Blake had won this battle, but he hadn't broken her spirit. As she packed her single duffel bag, Maya didn't know that her quiet dignity was about to inspire something unprecedented in the history of the base. She didn't know that her transfer would coincide with an event that would change everything. She simply prepared to leave with the same professionalism that had defined her entire career, unaware that the harsh Afghan mountains were about to bear witness to her character. The morning of Maya's departure dawned cold and clear, the Afghan sun rising over jagged peaks that surrounded the isolated base. She dressed in her full uniform, every detail perfect despite the circumstances. Her appearance was immaculate, her bearing military straight, despite the weight of injustice on her shoulders. Word had spread throughout the base during the night. Marines lined the walkways as she made her way toward the motor pool, their faces grim with understanding. Sergeant Martinez stood at attention as she passed, his salute crisp and defiant. Lieutenant Collins fought back tears, her hand trembling as she brought it to her brow. "They're making a mistake, Staff Sergeant," whispered Lance Corporal Johnson, a young Marine Maya had mentored. "Everyone knows they're making a mistake." Maya nodded once, maintaining her composure. "Take care of each other," she said simply. "That's what matters." At the motor pool, the wind whipped dust around her as she approached the convoy that would carry her away from the only unit she had known for 2 years. Behind her, She could hear the whispered conversations of Marines who had gathered to witness her departure. Colonel Blake stood near the command center, his expression satisfied as he watched his victory unfold. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison remained in his office, avoiding the scene he had allowed to happen. Captain Angela Reyes, the operations officer, stood with folded arms and a carefully neutral expression that couldn't hide her discomfort. As Maya walked toward the lead vehicle, she passed a group of Marines who had served under her guidance. Corporal Robert Taylor stepped forward, his voice carrying across the motor pool. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," he called out, his voice formal but filled with emotion. "It's been an honor serving with you, ma'am." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Other voices joined in, creating a chorus of respect that Blake's accusations couldn't silence. "Honor serving with you, Staff Sergeant. Best NCO on the base. Thank you for everything you taught us." Maya felt her throat tighten, but she maintained her military bearing. She had been prepared for silence, for embarrassment, for the lonely walk of the disgraced. Instead, she was experiencing something unprecedented, a unit's refusal to accept injustice quietly. At the lead vehicle, the driver, Corporal Michael Torres, helped her with her gear. She had worked with Torres during multiple operations, had trusted him with critical logistics, had seen him grow from an uncertain recruit into a confident Marine. "Staff Sergeant," he said quietly, "did you know this would happen? Did you expect everyone to respond like this?" Maya looked back at the faces watching her departure. These were professionals who understood excellence, who recognized integrity, who knew the difference between leadership and authority. They might not have the power to change her fate, but they had the courage to bear witness to injustice. As the convoy prepared to depart, Maya kept her eyes forward, focused on the road, ahead where her uncertain future waited. She didn't turn around to see what was beginning to happen behind her, didn't witness the extraordinary events that were about to unfold across the entire base. But throughout the outpost, something unprecedented was stirring. In the communications center, Staff Sergeant Lisa Rodriguez pulled out a file she had kept for 6 months. A detailed report Maya had written documenting a critical intelligence gap that could have compromised an entire operation. An error Maya had identified and corrected quietly without seeking credit or recognition. In the Tactical Operations Center, Captain James Murphy remembered the time. Maya had worked 18 straight hours reconfiguring defensive positions after a surprise inspection, ensuring unit readiness while others slept. He had never properly thanked her for that effort, had never acknowledged how her dedication had prevented a potential security vulnerability. Across the base, Marines were remembering moments when Maya Rodriguez had quietly protected them, covered their mistakes, prevented their oversights from becoming career-ending disasters. She had been the safety net that others relied on, the competence that others took for granted. In the command center, intelligence specialist Amanda Foster discovered something interesting in the archived communications logs, a series of reports Blake had filed about Maya contained inconsistencies, contradictions, and timeline errors that suggested fabrication rather than fact. The truth was spreading through the base like wildfire, carried by hushed conversations and personal connections. Marines who had served with Maya were sharing stories, comparing notes, and reaching the same conclusion. One of the Corps' finest NCOs was being destroyed by lies and incompetence. As the convoy carried Maya toward the airfield, she remained unaware of the storm building behind her. She focused on maintaining her dignity, on preserving her integrity, on leaving with the same professionalism that had defined her career. She had no idea that her quiet grace was about to coincide with an event that would reshape everything, that her transfer would intersect with a moment that would reveal the difference between true leadership and hollow authority. The mountain passes stretched endlessly before her, but behind her, at the base she was leaving, everything was about to change. The attack began at 0317 hours, just under 3 hours after Maya's convoy had departed. The forward operating base had been relatively quiet for months, with only occasional harassment fire and minor probing attacks testing the perimeter. Intelligence had indicated minimal insurgent activity in the surrounding valleys, leading to a reduction in security posture and a complacency that proved disastrous. The first rockets struck the eastern perimeter, followed immediately by coordinated mortar fire that targeted the command center and communications array. Within minutes, the base was under full assault from 3 directions, with an estimated force of 60 to 80 attackers using the pre-dawn darkness for cover. Colonel Blake had been awakened by the initial explosions, stumbling into the Tactical Operations Center as reports flooded in from defensive positions around the perimeter. Status report, he demanded, his voice lacking the confidence it carried. During administrative briefings, "Sir, we have breaches at 3 points along the eastern perimeter," reported the watch officer, his voice strained but professional. "Communications are degraded, and we've lost contact with the northern observation post." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison arrived moments later, his face grim as he assessed the tactical displays. "Where's our QRF?" "Get the quick reaction force deployed to reinforce the eastern perimeter." The room fell silent, the answer obvious but difficult to voice. Captain Reyes finally spoke. "Sir, the QRF departed 3 hours ago. They're escorting Staff Sergeant Rodriguez to the airfield." Blake's face drained of color as the implications became clear. In his zeal to remove Maya from the base, he had authorized the deployment of the unit's primary rapid response team as her security escort, an unnecessary precaution that had been intended as a final humiliation. Now that decision had left the base critically vulnerable during the largest attack in months. "Recall them immediately," Harrison ordered. "Communications are down, sir," responded the radio operator. "We can't reach the convoy." Outside the operations center, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The eastern perimeter defenses were collapsing under concentrated attack, with insurgent forces exploiting gaps in the defensive positions. Marine fire teams were responding with disciplined resistance, but they were outnumbered and caught by surprise. Sergeant Martinez organized a hastily assembled defense of the command center, positioning Marines at key points and distributing ammunition with calm efficiency. But he knew they were fighting a losing battle without reinforcements. If Staff Sergeant Rodriguez were here, she'd know exactly how to counter this attack pattern, he muttered to Lieutenant Collins as they established a fallback position. She studied every approach to this base, knew every vulnerability. Collins nodded grimly. That's probably why Blake wanted her gone. 40 kilometers away, the convoy carrying Maya toward the airfield had stopped at a designated checkpoint. Standard protocol required a security halt before entering the mountain pass that led to the main valley road. The 6-vehicle convoy had established a defensive perimeter while the team leaders conferred about route conditions. Maya sat in the lead vehicle, her thoughts still focused on the base she was leaving behind and the uncertain future that awaited her at Bagram. The radio operator's voice broke her reverie. "Sir, I'm picking up fragmented transmissions from base. Something about multiple contacts and perimeter breaches." Corporal Torres turned to Maya, his expression concerned. "Staff Sergeant, it sounds like the base is under attack." Maya felt her training kick in immediately, setting aside personal concerns as the tactical situation took priority. "Let me hear it." The radio crackled with static, but fragments of communication were clear enough to paint a grim picture. The base was under coordinated assault with multiple breaches and degraded communications. The quick reaction force, the very convoy she was traveling with, was critically needed but unreachable. "Turn the convoy around," she said, her voice carrying the authority that had earned her the respect of Marines throughout the unit. The convoy commander, Lieutenant Davis, hesitated. "Staff Sergeant, my orders are to deliver you to the airfield." Colonel Blake was explicit. Maya fixed him with a steady gaze. "Lieutenant, there's a base full of Marines under attack, and we're the closest response force. Are you really going to prioritize my transfer over their lives?" Davis looked conflicted, torn between his direct orders and the obvious tactical necessity. "Blake will have my bars if I bring you back to base." "Then drop me here," Maya said. Without hesitation. "Continue to the airfield as ordered, but give me a vehicle and a radio. I'll respond to the attack alone." "That's suicide, Staff Sergeant," Torres interjected. Intelligence reports indicated at least 60 insurgents in the area. Maya's expression remained resolved. "Those are our Marines under attack. I'm not abandoning them because Colonel Blake has a problem with me." A moment of silence fell over the assembled team leaders as they processed her words. Then Lieutenant Davis straightened, his decision made. "Convoy, prepare to return to base," he ordered. "Combat formation, maximum speed. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will develop response tactics en route." As the vehicles turned and accelerated back toward the base, Maya pulled out her tablet and began reviewing the defensive layout of the outpost. She knew every approach, every vulnerability, every strategic position. Blake might have tried to exile her from combat, but he had inadvertently placed her in exactly the right position to save the base from disaster. "Radio check," she called to the communications officer. "Are we receiving any updates from the base?" "Still fragmented." "Staff Sergeant." Last transmission indicated breaches at the eastern perimeter, with insurgents approaching the command center. Maya nodded, her mind already mapping the attack pattern and formulating a response. "Lieutenant Davis, we need to approach from the western ridge. It'll give us elevation advantage and allow us to hit their rear elements while they're focused." On the base, Davis studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Your call, Staff Sergeant. You know the terrain better than anyone." As the convoy raced through the pre-dawn darkness, Maya felt a calm clarity she had never experienced in years of training. Everything she had studied, every tactical scenario she had analyzed, every combat drill she had perfected, all of it had prepared her for this moment. Colonel Blake had tried to deny her combat deployment for 18 months. Now she was returning to face exactly what he claimed she wasn't ready for. The irony wasn't lost on her, but Maya pushed personal vindication aside. The only thing that mattered was reaching the base in time. 5 minutes out, called the driver. "We'll reach the western approach shortly." Maya checked her weapon and addressed the Marines around her. "This isn't about me or Colonel Blake or any of the politics back at base. This is about doing what we trained for. These are our people under attack, and we're going to bring them home." The Marines nodded, their faces set with determination. In that moment, Maya realized something profound. Despite Blake's efforts to undermine her authority, these Marines were following her not because of rank or position, but because of earned respect and demonstrated competence. As the convoy approached the ridge overlooking the base, the full scale of the attack became visible. Muzzle flashes illuminated the pre-dawn darkness, with concentrated fire focused on the eastern perimeter and command center. The attackers, believing they had achieved surprise against a vulnerable target, had committed fully to the assault, leaving their rear positions exposed. "Perfect," Maya said quietly, identifying the tactical opportunity. "They don't know we're here." Lieutenant Davis looked to her for direction, the chain of command temporarily set aside in recognition of superior tactical knowledge. "Your call." "Staff Sergeant, how do we play this?" Maya studied the battle unfolding below, her mind calculating angles, fields of fire, and movement patterns. This was what she had trained for all along. This was the moment Blake had tried to prevent. This was her opportunity to demonstrate what competence truly meant in combat. "We split into 3 elements," she said, her voice calm and authoritative. "Team 1 establishes a support by fire position on this ridge. Team 2 flanks right to cut off their escape route through the eastern pass. Team 3 moves with me to reinforce the command center directly. Davis nodded, recognizing the soundness of the plan. You heard the staff sergeant. Execute. As the Marines moved into position, Maya took a moment to center herself. In a few minutes, she would be engaged in the combat role she had been denied for 18 months. The irony was painful but irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was protecting the Marines under attack. "Ready, Staff Sergeant?" asked Corporal Torres as the assault team prepared to move. Maya checked her weapon one final time. "Been ready for 18 months, Corporal. Let's bring our people home." The counterattack began with devastating precision. The support team opened fire from the ridge, catching the insurgent rear elements completely by surprise. Simultaneously, the flanking team moved to cut off the escape route, creating a tactical dilemma for the attacking force. Maya led the third team directly toward the command center, moving with the fluid efficiency that came from years of training and preparation. As they approached the perimeter, they encountered the first group of insurgents, who were completely unprepared for an attack from behind. The firefight was brief but intense. Maya moved with controlled aggression, her tactical decisions instantaneous and precise. Each movement, each command, each action demonstrated a level of combat proficiency that could only come from natural ability combined with rigorous preparation. Command Center, this is Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approaching from the western perimeter with reinforcements. Request status and support coordinates. The radio crackled with surprise and relief. "Rodriguez, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be halfway to Bagram." Maya recognized Martinez's voice. "Change of plans, Sergeant. What's your situation?" "Eastern perimeter compromised. Command center holding but surrounded. Colonel Blake and Lieutenant Colonel Harrison are pinned down in the TOC with limited security." "Understood. We're approaching. From your rear, prepare to coordinate fire support." As Maya's team fought their way toward the command center, the tide of battle began to shift. The insurgents, caught between the base defenders and the returning convoy, found themselves in an untenable position. What had begun as a surprise attack against a vulnerable target was becoming a costly failure. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, Colonel Blake watched the battle unfold with growing confusion. Where is this counterattack coming from? Who authorized this response? The radio operator looked up from his console. "Sir, it's Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. She's leading the QRF back from the checkpoint." Blake's face contorted with disbelief. "That's impossible. She's supposed to be en route to Bagram. She has no authority to engage." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison studied the tactical display, watching as the carefully coordinated counterattack systematically dismantled the insurgent assault. Authority or not, she's saving this base and everyone in it. Outside, Maya's team had reached the command center perimeter, linking up with Martinez's defenders and establishing a consolidated security position. The combined force immediately began pushing outward, reclaiming territory and forcing the attackers into retreat. "Eastern team, tighten the cordon," Maya ordered through the radio. "Don't let them escape through the pass. Ridge team, adjust. Fire to cover the northern approach." The coordinated response was working with textbook precision. The insurgent attack, which had nearly overwhelmed the base defenses, was collapsing under the pressure of Maya's tactical direction. "They're breaking," called Martinez as the attackers began a disorganized retreat toward the eastern pass, only to find their escape route blocked by the flanking team from the convoy. Caught in a well-executed tactical vice, the insurgent force had no choice but to scatter into the surrounding mountains, abandoning their assault and leaving behind weapons, equipment, and casualties. As the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, Maya directed the establishment of security positions and casualty collection points. The base had suffered damage and casualties, But what could have been a devastating defeat had been transformed into a decisive victory. Lieutenant Davis approached her as she coordinated the final security sweep. "Staff Sergeant, Colonel Blake is requesting your presence in the command center immediately." Maya nodded, her expression unreadable. The adrenaline of combat was fading, allowing reality to reassert itself. She had directly contravened her transfer orders, had returned to a base she had been explicitly ordered to leave, had taken tactical command during a crisis without proper authorization. By any strict interpretation of military protocol, she had committed multiple serious infractions. But she had also unquestionably saved the base and everyone in it from potential disaster. As she walked toward the command center, Marines stopped what they were doing and stood at attention. Not the formal attention of military protocol, but the genuine respect of professionals acknowledging excellence in their midst. Martinez fell into step beside her. "What you did today, coming back when you could have continued to Bagram, taking command when no one would have blamed you for staying away. That's real leadership, Staff Sergeant." Maya kept her eyes forward, her expression professional. "I did what any Marine would do, Sergeant, nothing more." But they both knew that wasn't true. She had done what only the finest Marines would do: put mission and people above personal interest, demonstrate excellence under the most challenging conditions, lead from the front when leadership was most needed. At the entrance to the command center, Maya paused and took a deep breath. Whatever consequences awaited her inside, she would face them with the same dignity and professionalism that had defined her entire career. The Tactical Operations Center was a scene of controlled chaos. Officers coordinated security operations, communications specialists restored damaged systems, and medical reports were being compiled and transmitted to higher headquarters. Colonel Blake and Lieutenant Colonel Harrison stood at the central tactical display, studying the aftermath of the battle. Both men fell silent as Maya entered and came to attention. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez reporting as ordered, sir." Blake's face was a mask of conflicting emotions: anger at her defiance of his orders, humiliation at the failure of his security measures, and the undeniable recognition that she had saved the base he had failed to protect. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison studied her for a long moment, then did something unprecedented. He stood at attention and saluted her, a gesture of respect rarely offered to a non-commissioned officer by a senior commander. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, your actions today exemplify the highest traditions of the Marine Corps. You returned to a base under attack when you could have continued to your new assignment. You implemented a tactical response that unquestionably saved lives and prevented the fall of this outpost." Maya returned the salute crisply. "Thank you, sir. The quick reaction force performed exceptionally. They deserve the credit." "The QRF followed your tactical direction," Harrison continued. "Every Marine I've spoken with has made that clear. Your knowledge of this terrain, your understanding of our defensive vulnerabilities, and your combat leadership made the difference." Today, Colonel Blake finally found his voice. That doesn't change the fact that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez directly contravened her transfer orders. She was specifically directed to proceed to Bagram. Harrison turned to Blake, his expression hardening. "Colonel, I've just received communication from Division Headquarters. They've been reviewing the circumstances of Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's transfer for the past week. Your documentation contained inconsistencies that raise significant concerns." Blake's face paled. "Sir, I can explain." "Save it, Colonel," Harrison cut him off. "Multiple Marines have come forward with testimony about your systematic campaign against Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. Your fabricated allegations, your manipulation of the evaluation process, your deliberate undermining of a decorated Marine. All of it is being investigated by the THEA Inspector General's office." Maya stood silently, processing the surreal turn of events. After months of systematic persecution, after accepting that her career might be destroyed by injustice, Everything was changing in ways she couldn't have anticipated. "Lieutenant Colonel," Blake began, desperation creeping into his voice. "There may have been some misunderstandings, some miscommunication about Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's performance and attitude." "Miscommunication?" Harrison's voice carried dangerous undertones. "You deliberately removed our most qualified combat leader from this base hours before a major attack. An attack that nearly succeeded because of your decision. If Staff Sergeant Rodriguez hadn't disobeyed your ill-conceived orders, we might be counting bodies instead of victories right now." The command center had fallen silent except for the essential communication of ongoing operations. Every Marine present understood they were witnessing something historic, the moment when truth finally overcame the politics and prejudice that had nearly destroyed one of their finest. Harrison turned back to Maya. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, your transfer." Harrison turned back to Maya. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, your transfer orders are hereby rescinded, effective immediately. You're being reinstated to your full duties with commendation for your actions today." Blake's face contorted with disbelief. "Sir, this is highly irregular. There are protocols, procedures, the same protocols and procedures you manipulated to target an exemplary Marine." Harrison's voice cut through Blake's objections like a combat knife. "Colonel, you're relieved of duty pending full investigation. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow to discuss your transfer back to division headquarters." The words echoed across the command center, carrying the weight of justice finally being served. Blake's face went pale as he realized that his campaign against Maya had ultimately destroyed his own career. The web of lies he had carefully constructed had collapsed under the weight of Maya's demonstrated excellence in combat. As Blake was escorted from the command center, Harrison turned to Maya. "Staff Sergeant, I owe you an apology. I failed in my duty to protect the Marines under my command from injustice. I allowed Blake's manipulations to cloud my judgment, and I nearly lost one of my finest NCOs because of it." Maya maintained her professional bearing. "Sir, we all serve under the chain of command. I understand the position you were in." Harrison shook his head. "Understanding doesn't make it right. Staff Sergeant, leadership means having the courage to question even when questioning is difficult. I failed that test, and Marines nearly died because of it." As Maya left the command center, she found a crowd of Marines waiting outside. The sight took her breath away. Dozens of Marines, many still in combat gear, had gathered to show their support. They stood at attention, their faces reflecting a respect that transcended rank or protocol. Sergeant Martinez stepped forward. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, on behalf of all of us, thank you for coming back when you could have continued to Bagram. Thank you for knowing what to do when leadership was needed most. Thank you for showing us what it means to be a Marine when being a Marine is hardest." Maya felt a tightness in her throat but maintained her composure. "We're Marines. We take care of our own. Every one of you would have done the same." But they all knew that wasn't entirely true. What Maya had done, returning to face combat after being unjustly exiled, taking command when she could have remained safely distant, risking her career to protect her fellow Marines, represented something beyond ordinary service. It demonstrated a level of moral courage as impressive as her tactical skill. As the gathering dispersed and Marines returned to their duties, Lieutenant Collins approached. "Maya, Division is sending investigators tomorrow. They want statements from everyone about Blake's campaign against you. This goes beyond just our base. They're looking at his entire command history." Maya nodded, processing the implications. "Make sure everyone understands they should tell the truth, whatever that is. This isn't about me or Blake. It's about making sure the system works the way it's supposed to." That evening, as Maya walked through the base supervising recovery operations, she realized something had fundamentally changed. Marines who had previously treated her with professional courtesy now regarded her with genuine respect. Officers who had been distant now sought her tactical input openly. The barriers that had existed before, subtle but real, had been shattered by the events of the day. Captain Reyes found her inspecting damaged perimeter defenses. "Staff Sergeant, HQ just sent word. They're expediting your combat deployment approval. You're being offered your choice of forward units, effective immediately." The news hit Maya with unexpected force. After 18 months of rejections, after watching less qualified Marines receive the deployment she had been denied, after being told repeatedly that she wasn't ready for combat operations, now she was being offered exactly what she had requested all along. "Thank you for informing me, Captain," she replied professionally, hiding the complex emotions beneath the surface. Reyes studied her for a moment. "For what it's worth, Staff Sergeant, what you did today is being discussed throughout the entire UO. 3 other bases have requested you specifically for their combat operations. Your tactical coordination of the counterattack is already being incorporated into response planning." As darkness fell over the mountains, Maya sat alone on the western perimeter wall, looking out at the terrain where she had led the counterattack. Hours earlier, the events of the day seemed surreal, from disgraced exile to combat leadership to vindication, all within 12 hours. Lieutenant Davis approached and sat beside her, his expression thoughtful. "Hell of a day, Staff Sergeant." Maya nodded, her eyes still on the darkening mountains. "Hell of a day, Lieutenant. You know what impressed me most?" Davis continued. "Not the tactical execution, though that was textbook perfect. Not the combat leadership, though you moved like you'd been doing this for years." "What then?" Maya asked. "The fact that you never once made it about you," Davis said quietly. "When I picked you up this morning, you were being exiled from your base because of a superior officer's vendetta. You had every right to be bitter, angry, focused on the injustice. But the moment you heard the base was under attack, none of that mattered to you. The only thing you cared about was protecting your fellow Marines." Maya considered his words carefully. "That's the job, Lieutenant. Personal feelings don't matter when lives are at stake." "Maybe," Davis acknowledged. "But that level of selflessness, putting the mission and the Marines above your own justified grievances, that's rare. Even in the Corps, that's what real leadership looks like." The next morning brought a flurry of activity as division. Representatives arrived to investigate Blake's conduct and document the attack. Maya spent hours providing detailed statements about the systematic campaign against her, the fabricated complaints, the manipulated evaluations, the deliberate undermining of her authority. But she also spent time ensuring that the Marines, who had performed exceptionally during the attack, received proper recognition. She wrote detailed commendations for Sergeant Martinez, Lieutenant Collins, and others who had maintained the base defense until reinforcements arrived. She highlighted Corporal Torres's decisive actions during the counterattack. She made sure that every Marine who had distinguished themselves was acknowledged, regardless of rank or position. 3 days later, Division Headquarters delivered their preliminary findings. Colonel Richard Blake was being removed from command permanently and faced potential court-martial for dereliction of duty, falsification of official records, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The evidence against him was overwhelming, with dozens of Marines providing testimony about his systematic persecution of Maya and other Marines he perceived as threats to his authority. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, while not facing charges, was being reassigned to a non-command position, pending further review of his failure to properly investigate Blake's actions. His career advancement was effectively over, a price he acknowledged as appropriate for his failure to protect the Marines under his command from injustice. But the most significant development for Maya came in the form of new orders delivered personally by Brigadier General Rebecca Palmer, the division commander who had flown in specifically to address the situation. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Palmer began as they met in the command center. "I've reviewed your service record, your combat readiness evaluations, and your tactical performance during the recent attack. I've also reviewed the disgraceful campaign conducted against you by Colonel Blake." Maya stood at attention, uncertain where this was heading. "The Marine Corps failed you, Staff Sergeant," Palmer continued bluntly. "We allowed a system to exist where excellence could be punished, where competence could be perceived as threat, where a decorated Marine could be persecuted for no reason beyond doing her job exceptionally well. Ma'am, Palmer held up a hand. "I'm not finished. Staff Sergeant, what happened to you wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a cultural problem that we need to address. The fact that you performed brilliantly when given the opportunity only highlights how much we've lost by failing to put our most qualified personnel in positions where their talents can best serve the Corps." The general placed a folder on the table between them. "These are your new orders, Staff Sergeant. You're being promoted to Gunnery Sergeant effective immediately and assigned as the tactical advisor to Special Operations Task Force Sierra. They specifically requested you based on your performance during the attack." Maya felt a surge of emotion she struggled to control. After 18 months of rejection, after being told repeatedly that she wasn't ready for combat operations, she was being offered not just a standard deployment, but assignment to one of the most elite units in theater. "Additionally," Palmer continued, "I'm implementing what we're calling the Rodriguez Protocol throughout the division. It's a new system for evaluating combat deployment requests based solely on qualifications and demonstrated ability, with multiple level review to prevent the kind of manipulation Blake engaged in." The implications of this were enormous. It meant that Maya's experience, both the persecution she had endured and the excellence she had demonstrated, would create lasting change for other Marines facing similar barriers. "Thank you, General," Maya said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I'm honored by the confidence you're placing in me." Palmer's expression softened slightly. "The confidence is well earned, Gunnery Sergeant. The only regret is that it took a crisis for the Corps to recognize what should have been obvious all along, that combat readiness is measured by performance, not perception." As word of Maya's promotion and new assignments spread through the base, Marines approached her with congratulations and, in many cases, admissions that they had witnessed Blake's campaign against her, but had lacked the courage to speak up. Sergeant Martinez found her in the armory, preparing equipment for her upcoming deployment. "Gunny," he said, the new rank still unfamiliar but appropriate, "I should have done more. I saw what Blake was doing to you, but I was afraid for my own career." Maya shook her head. "You did what you could, James. The system was designed to isolate people like me, to make speaking up seem futile. What matters is that when it counted, when the base was under attack, you did your job perfectly." "But that's just it," Martinez insisted. "You taught us to do our jobs. You trained us for exactly that scenario. Even when Blake was undermining you, you never stopped preparing us for combat." The realization hit Maya with unexpected force. Throughout Blake's campaign against her, despite the injustice and frustration, she had never stopped fulfilling her responsibilities to the Marines under her guidance. She had continued training them, preparing them, ensuring they were ready for the combat she was being denied. That night, as Maya packed for her deployment to Task Force Sierra, Lieutenant Collins came to her quarters. "I brought something you should see before you leave," she said, handing Maya a tablet. "It's being circulated throughout the EO." On the screen was an analysis of the counterattack Maya had led, complete with tactical diagrams, timing sequences, and coordination elements. It had been designated as a textbook example of rapid response to a complex attack, with specific emphasis on the leadership principles demonstrated during the operation. "They're using your counterattack as a training model at the Combat Operations Center," Collins explained. "Every base in the region is implementing your tactical approach to their response planning. Maya studied the analysis, noting with satisfaction that it highlighted the contributions of the entire team, not just her leadership. Make sure Martinez and the others see this. They deserve recognition for their part in the response. That's what I mean, Collins said, her voice carrying genuine admiration. Even now, even after everything Blake put you through, you're still focused on making sure others receive credit. That's why Marines would follow you anywhere, Maya, not because of rank or position, but because you exemplify what leadership should be. The morning of Maya's departure dawned clear and cold, the Afghan mountains standing silent witness to another transition in her journey. But unlike her previous attempted departure, this one carried none of the weight of injustice or defeat. This was not an exile but an advancement, not a punishment but a recognition of excellence. Marines lined the pathways as she made her way to the helicopter landing zone, much as they had days earlier when she had been leaving in disgrace. But this time, there was no need for subtle gestures of support or whispered encouragements. This time, they stood at attention openly, their respect evident in every face. Newly promoted Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez walked through their midst with the quiet confidence that had always defined her, acknowledging their salutes with professional courtesy. She had proven herself not through words but through actions, not through politics but through performance. At the landing zone, Lieutenant Colonel Harrison waited beside the helicopter that would transport her to Task Force Sierra's forward operating base. His expression was solemn but determined. "Gunnery Sergeant," he said as she approached, "before you leave, I want you to know that the investigation into Blake's conduct has been expanded to include his previous commands. We've already identified 3 other Marines who experienced similar persecution." Maya nodded, understanding the significance. Blake's removal wasn't just about her personal vindication. It represented a systemic correction that would protect others from similar injustice. "The Rodriguez Protocol is being implemented division-wide," Harrison continued. "No deployment request will be denied without multi-level review, and all evaluations will be subject to independent verification. What happened to you won't happen to others." The helicopter's engine spooled up, signaling imminent departure. Maya squared her shoulders, her gear ready, her mind already shifting to the mission ahead. "Thank you for informing me, sir. I'm glad some good will come from this situation." Harrison extended his hand. "You've taught this entire base something important, Gunny. Not just about combat tactics or operational planning, but about integrity under pressure. About maintaining your principles even when the system fails you. That lesson may be more valuable than anything in the tactical manuals." As Maya boarded the helicopter, she glanced back at the base that had been both her prison and the site of her vindication. Colonel Blake had tried to deny her the opportunity to serve in combat for 18 months. He had manipulated the system, falsified records, and undermined her authority at every turn. But in the end, his actions had placed her in exactly the right position to demonstrate her true capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on her. If Blake hadn't engineered her transfer, she wouldn't have been with the convoy that returned to save the base. If he hadn't systematically undermined her, the contrast between his leadership and hers wouldn't have been so starkly revealed during the crisis. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying her toward the elite unit that had specifically requested her services, Maya Rodriguez reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The persecution had been real, the injustice painful, the barriers substantial. But they hadn't broken her spirit or compromised her integrity. Instead, they had forged her into exactly the leader the Marine Corps needed most, someone who understood that true authority comes not from rank or position, but from demonstrated excellence and unwavering integrity. Someone who recognized that leadership isn't about power over others, but service to mission and Marines. The base diminished beneath her as the helicopter gained altitude, but the legacy she left behind would continue to grow. The Rodriguez Protocol would ensure that other qualified Marines wouldn't face the same barriers she had overcome. The tactical lessons from her counterattack would save lives throughout the region. And the example she had set of dignity, under pressure, of excellence despite persecution, of selfless service even when personally wronged, would inspire generations of Marines to come. The mountains stretched endlessly before her, rugged and challenging. But Gunnery Sergeant Maya Rodriguez faced them with the same quiet confidence that had carried her through 18 months of rejection and vindication. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them with the unwavering commitment to excellence that defined her as a Marine and as a leader. 3 months later, Maya stood on a windswept ridge overlooking a remote valley in eastern Afghanistan. Task Force Sierra was preparing for a complex operation against a high-value target, and Maya's tactical expertise had been central to the planning process. The elite unit had welcomed her without reservation, recognizing the value of her combat instincts and operational knowledge. Captain Michael Reynolds, the task force commander, joined her at the observation point. "Assessment, Gunny?" Maya studied the terrain through her binoculars. "The primary approach is viable, sir, but I recommend we establish a secondary position. Here," she indicated a spot on the tactical map, "to provide overwatch and cut off any potential escape routes." Reynolds nodded, having learned quickly to trust Maya's tactical judgment. "Make it happen, Gunny, your call on personnel assignment." This simple exchange represented everything that had changed in Maya's professional life. Her input wasn't just tolerated but actively sought. Her expertise wasn't questioned but valued. Her leadership wasn't undermined but empowered. The operation that followed demonstrated precisely why Task Force Sierra had requested Maya specifically. Her understanding of terrain, her anticipation of enemy movements, her coordination of multiple elements, all contributed to a textbook execution that achieved objectives with minimal risk to personnel. As the unit extracted after mission completion, Reynolds approached her again. "Headquarters called, Gunny. The Rodriguez Protocol is being implemented corps-wide. Every Marine, regardless of gender, will have their deployment requests evaluated solely on demonstrated ability and qualifications." Maya absorbed this news with professional composure, but the significance wasn't lost on her. What had begun as one officer's campaign of persecution against a single Marine had ultimately led to systemic change that would benefit countless others facing similar barriers. "Additionally," Reynolds continued, "Division is convening a special selection board next month. They're looking for officers to lead the new tactical response. Teams being formed throughout the IO. Your name has been submitted for consideration." "Sir, I'm an NCO, not an officer," Maya pointed out. Reynolds smiled. "Not for much longer, if Division has their way. They're offering you a direct commission to First Lieutenant, effective immediately upon acceptance." The helicopter banked toward their forward base, the mountains falling away beneath them. Maya thought about the journey that had brought her here, from denied deployment requests to elite special operations, from persecuted NCO to prospective officer, from fighting the system to changing it from within. Colonel Blake had tried to destroy her career because he felt threatened by her competence. Instead, he had inadvertently created the circumstances that allowed her to demonstrate exactly why that competence was so valuable to the Corps. The very qualities he had feared. Her tactical expertise, her natural leadership, her unwavering integrity, had ultimately proven to be exactly what the Marine Corps needed most. As the helicopter touched down at the forward operating base, Maya saw a group of Marines waiting on the landing zone. Among them was Sergeant Martinez, now assigned to a neighboring outpost, and Lieutenant Collins, who had been transferred to Division Headquarters to help implement the new protocols. "Word travels fast," Reynolds observed as they disembarked. "Looks like news of your commission is already making the rounds." Martinez approached with a crisp salute. "Congratulations, ma'am. Or should I still say Gunny until it's official?" Maya returned the salute with professional courtesy. "Gunny works fine, Sergeant. Old habits die hard." "We brought something you should see," Colin said, handing Maya a tablet. It just came. Through official channels. On the screen was a formal notification. Colonel Richard Blake had been court-martialed and dismissed from service. The charges included dereliction of duty, falsification of records, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The evidence provided by dozens of Marines had been overwhelming, revealing a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond his campaign against Maya. "Justice served," Martinez said quietly. "Too late for some, but better late than never." Maya handed the tablet back, her expression professional, but her eyes reflecting the vindication she felt. Blake's systematic persecution had ultimately destroyed his own career, while elevating hers, not because she had sought revenge, but because she had remained focused on excellence regardless of the barriers placed in her path. "The best part," Collins added, "is that 3 other Marines who were forced out by Blake's actions in previous commands are being offered reinstatement with back pay and cleared records. Your stand against him didn't just save your career, it saved theirs too." That evening, as Maya prepared for her next mission, she reflected on the lesson her journey had taught her. Excellence cannot be permanently suppressed. Integrity cannot be ultimately defeated. True leadership will eventually be recognized, regardless of the obstacles placed in its path. The system wasn't perfect. There would always be officers like Blake who viewed competence as threat rather than asset. There would always be institutional barriers that made progress difficult. But Maya's experience had proven that persistence, in the face of injustice, commitment to excellence despite persecution, and unwavering integrity under pressure could not only overcome those barriers but transform them into opportunities for greater service. Tomorrow she would begin planning for her first mission as a commissioned officer, leading Marines into combat operations she had once been told she wasn't qualified to participate in. The irony wasn't lost on her, but Maya Rodriguez wasn't focused on vindication. She was focused on the responsibility that came with her new position, the duty to ensure that every Marine under her command had the opportunity to serve according to their abilities rather than others' perceptions. The mountains of Afghanistan stretched endlessly before her, full of challenges and dangers. But First Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez faced them with the quiet confidence of someone who had overcome barriers far more formidable than mere terrain. Whatever obstacles lay ahead, she would meet them with the same unwavering commitment to excellence that had defined her journey from denied combat requests to battlefield leadership. And somewhere in those mountains, other Marines would learn the lesson of her example, that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is not bitter complaint, but brilliant performance. That excellence, when combined with integrity, becomes a force that no amount of persecution can ultimately suppress. 6 months into her commission, First Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez stood in the Tactical Operations Center of Forward Operating Base Condor, studying intelligence reports with the focused intensity that had become her trademark. Task Force Sierra had evolved under her tactical leadership, transforming from an elite but conventional special operations unit into something unprecedented in the Afghan theater, a rapid response force that combined lightning mobility with surgical precision. "Lieutenant, you need to see this," called Captain Reynolds, now her executive officer after a reorganization that had placed Maya in command of the expanded task force. He handed her a tablet displaying real-time drone footage of a remote village in the eastern mountains. Maya studied the feed with practiced eyes, immediately identifying the tactical significance. Taliban fighters moving civilians as human shields. "Looks like they're establishing a defensive position in the village center." Reynolds nodded grimly. "Local intelligence confirms 30-plus fighters, heavily armed. They've taken the village elder and his family hostage, threatening execution if coalition forces approach." The situation was precisely the kind of complex, high-stakes scenario that conventional tactics struggled to address. Direct assault would risk civilian casualties. Extended siege would give the enemy time to strengthen their position. Aerial bombardment was out of the question with hostages in play. "Where's the nearest QRF?" Maya asked, referring to the quick reaction force that would normally respond to such a situation. "That's the problem," Reynolds replied. 2 companies from 2nd Battalion were ambushed in the Northern Valley. All available forces are committed to their extraction. Division says no additional assets available for at least 48 hours. Maya processed this information with the calm focus that had become her hallmark under pressure. The lives of innocent civilians hung in the balance, with no conventional forces available to intervene. The easy decision would be to wait for reinforcements, to follow established protocol, to avoid the risk of acting without full support. But Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez had learned through hard experience that sometimes leadership meant making difficult decisions when easy ones would cost lives. "Prep the rapid tactical team," she ordered, her voice carrying the quiet authority that inspired immediate compliance. "We deploy in 30 minutes. Reynolds hesitated for just a moment. "Lieutenant, Division hasn't authorized this operation. We're supposed to be preparing for the Western Offensive next week." Maya met his gaze steadily. "Those civilians won't be alive next week, Captain. The Taliban fighters will execute them as soon as they believe no response is coming. I'm not letting that happen on my watch. We'll be operating without air support, without reinforcements, without official sanction," Reynolds pointed out, not disagreeing but ensuring she understood the implications. "Then we'll need to be perfect," Maya replied simply. "Brief the team, full tactical loadout, minimal footprint, complete communications discipline. We move in 3 elements using the mountain approach we developed last month." As Reynolds left to prepare the team, Maya studied the village layout, mentally mapping approaches, fields of fire, and extraction routes. What she was about to attempt would challenge even the elite operators under her command. A precision hostage rescue with minimal personnel against a numerically superior force in unfamiliar terrain. Sergeant Martinez, now assigned permanently to her task force, entered the operations center. "Word is we're going in alone, ma'am." Maya nodded, still focused on the tactical display. 30 minutes, Sergeant." "Spread the word." "Already done," Martinez replied. "The team is gearing up now." Everyone volunteered the moment they heard the situation. He paused, then added, "They're calling it a Rodriguez special. Impossible odds, no backup, civilians at risk. Exactly the kind of mission no one else would take." Maya looked up from the display, momentarily surprised. "A Rodriguez special?" Martinez nodded, his expression serious but proud. "Yes, ma'am. After what happened at the base 6 months ago, your reputation spread throughout the theater. Marines talk about how you came back when you could have stayed away, how you led the counterattack when others were paralyzed, how you never hesitated even though the system had tried to destroy your career." The irony wasn't lost on Maya. Colonel Blake had spent 18 months trying to prevent her from serving in combat, claiming she wasn't ready for the responsibility. Now, 6 months after his disgrace and her vindication, she was preparing to lead an elite team into one of the most challenging combat operations in the region because no one else was willing to take the risk. "This isn't about reputation, Sergeant," she said firmly. "It's about those civilians. No one deserves to die because bureaucracy prevents us from acting." "Understood, ma'am," Martinez replied. "But you should know, every Marine on this team volunteered specifically to serve under your command. They believe in you, not because of rank or position, but because you've proven what real leadership looks like." 27 minutes later, 2 Black Hawk helicopters lifted off from Forward Operating Base Condor, banking sharply toward the eastern mountains. Inside, 16 elite operators, the entire rapid tactical team, prepared for a mission that would test every aspect of their training and courage. Maya sat near the open door, reviewing the operation plan one final time. The approach would utilize terrain features to mask their insertion. 3 teams would deploy simultaneously, 1 to secure the perimeter, 1 to create a strategic diversion, and 1, led by Maya personally, to extract the hostages. Captain Reynolds, sitting across from her, raised his voice above the rotor. "Noise. Just received word from Division. They're denying authorization for this operation, ordering immediate return to base." Maya met his gaze steadily. "Note the objection in the operational log, Captain. We're proceeding as planned." Reynolds nodded, having expected this response. "Already done, Lieutenant. For the record, I fully support your decision. Let's be clear about what we're doing," Maya addressed the team. "We're disregarding a direct order from Division. When we return, if we return, there will be consequences. I'll accept full responsibility, but each of you should understand the potential impact on your careers." Staff Sergeant Wilson, the team's senior NCO, spoke for the group. "With respect, ma'am, we all knew what we were signing up for when we volunteered for this task force. Division can court-martial us when we get back, after we save those civilians." The helicopters touched down 3 kilometers from the target village, using a mountain ridge to shield their approach from observation. The team deployed with practiced efficiency, establishing security and communications within minutes. Maya gathered her team leaders for a final brief, using a terrain model hastily constructed in the dirt. "Intel shows the hostages concentrated here, in the village. Elders Compound. Taliban fighters have established defensive positions here, here, and here. Our primary challenge is the open ground between the northern approach and the compound. Team 1 will create a diversion at the southern edge of the village. Team 2 will secure our extraction route and provide overwatch. Team 3, with me, will execute the hostage extraction." Questions? There were none. These Marines had trained together for months under Maya's leadership. They understood not just the tactical plan, but the philosophy behind it: precision over force, intelligence over volume, surgical execution over overwhelming firepower. Comms check every 5 minutes. Execute on my mark in exactly 17 minutes. Synchronize watches. Now. As the teams moved into position, Maya felt a familiar calm settling over her. This was what she had trained for throughout her career. This was what Colonel Blake had tried to prevent her from doing. This was where her natural talents and relentless preparation found their perfect expression, leading Marines in high-stakes operations where lives hung in the balance. The operation began with textbook precision. Team 1's diversion, a carefully orchestrated series of explosions and targeted fire, drew Taliban fighters to the southern edge of the village. Team 2 established overwatch positions, identifying and neutralizing potential threats along the extraction route. Maya led Team 3 through a narrow ravine that provided concealed approach to the northern edge of the village. They moved with the silent efficiency of elite operators, each Marine anticipating the next phase of the mission without need for verbal communication. At the village perimeter, Maya held up a closed fist, signaling the team to halt. Through her tactical optics, she could see 4 Taliban fighters guarding the approach to the Elders' compound. They were alert but distracted by the commotion at the southern edge of the village, exactly as planned. Maya signaled to her snipers, who responded with simultaneous precision fire. The guards dropped without alarm, creating the critical opening they needed. The team moved forward immediately, crossing the open ground in a practiced rush that minimized exposure while maintaining tactical formation. At the compound wall, Maya divided her team, sending 4 Marines to secure the perimeter while she led the primary extraction element through the main entrance. Inside, they encountered 3 more Taliban fighters, neutralizing them with silenced weapons, before they could alert others. The hostages, the village elder, his wife, and 3 young children were bound and terrified in the central room. Maya approached them directly, speaking in practiced Pashto. "We're United States Marines," she said calmly, holstering her weapon to appear less threatening. "We're here to take you to safety. Please remain quiet and follow our instructions." "Exactly." The elder's eyes widened with surprise, not just at the sudden rescue, but at the female Marine officer leading it. Maya had encountered this reaction before, but she had long since learned that competence transcended cultural expectations. Action spoke louder than preconceptions. "My people," the elder whispered urgently. "The Taliban have taken others. 20 villagers in the community building." This was not in the intelligence briefing. 20 additional hostages significantly complicated the extraction. Maya made a split-second decision that would define the operation. "Change of plans," she said into her unit. "Team 1, maintain diversion. Team 2, prepare for additional extraction. We have 20 more hostages than expected." Captain Reynolds' voice came through clearly. "Lieutenant, that exceeds our extraction capacity. Helicopters are configured. For the original package only." Maya processed this information instantly, identifying options and evaluating risks with the clarity that had become her hallmark under pressure. "Team 2, move to my position. Team 1, extend diversion timeline by 7 minutes. The decision was tactically sound but operationally daring. By committing her entire force to the expanded extraction, Maya was accepting significantly increased risk. The diversion would be less effective over time. The extraction route would be more vulnerable. The helicopters would be dangerously overloaded. But the alternative was unacceptable, leaving 20 innocent civilians to die when they had the capability to save them. Team 2 arrived at the compound 3 minutes later, just as Maya's team was preparing the initial hostages for movement. Staff Sergeant Wilson looked to her for direction, understanding the complexity of their new situation. "2 teams, Maya ordered. "My team extracts the original package. Your team secures and extracts the additional hostages from the community building. Rendezvous at extraction point in 12 minutes exactly. Synchronize." Now, as Wilson's team moved toward the community building, Maya led the village elder and his family toward the extraction route. The diversion at the southern edge of the village was still drawing Taliban attention, but intelligence indicated the enemy was becoming suspicious of the coordinated nature of the explosions and gunfire. "Team 1, prepare to disengage," Maya ordered. "Fall back to secondary positions and provide covering fire for the extraction teams." The operation was now in its most vulnerable phase. 2 separate extraction teams moving with civilian hostages toward a single extraction point, with enemy forces beginning to realize the true nature of the attack. The margin for error had vanished completely. Maya's team reached the extraction point first, securing the landing zone for the incoming helicopters. Through her tactical optics, she could see Wilson's team approaching with the additional hostages, moving slower than planned due to several elderly civilians unable to maintain the pace. "Team 2, what's your status?" she called through the 7 minutes to extraction point, Wilson replied, his voice tense but controlled. "We have wounded civilians. Moving as fast as possible." Maya checked her watch. The helicopters were scheduled to arrive in 5 minutes, based on the original timeline. Wilson's team wouldn't make it before they arrived, creating a dangerous vulnerability during loading. "Team 1, adjust positions to cover Team 2's approach," she ordered. "Prepare for staggered extraction." As the sound of approaching helicopters grew audible, Maya made another decision that exemplified her leadership philosophy. "Team 3 with me," she ordered, moving back toward Wilson's approaching group. Captain Reynolds' voice came through the immediately. "Lieutenant, that's not advisable. Extraction birds will be on the ground in 4 minutes." And Team 2 won't make it in 4 minutes, Maya replied calmly. We're not leaving anyone behind, Captain. Hold the LZ. Maya led her team back along the extraction route, meeting Wilson's group approximately 500 meters from the landing zone. The additional hostages included several elderly villagers and 2 wounded children, explaining their slower pace. We'll take the wounded, Maya told Wilson. Reform your perimeter and maintain maximum pace. As they redistributed the civilians, the first shots rang out from the village. The Taliban fighters had identified the true nature of the operation and were now in pursuit, firing from multiple positions along the village perimeter. Team 1, engage pursuing forces, Maya ordered. Covering fire only, delay rather than neutralize. The helicopters appeared over the ridge, just as the combined teams reached the landing zone, their rotors throwing dust across the tense scene. Maya coordinated the loading process personally, ensuring wounded civilians went first, followed by the elderly and children. The Taliban fire was intensifying, with rounds striking near the landing zone as the last civilians boarded. Maya maintained her position at the perimeter, directing defensive fire and ensuring every team member was accounted for. Final civilian loaded, Reynolds reported from the lead helicopter. All teams disengage and board immediately. Maya watched as her Marines executed a textbook fighting withdrawal, maintaining covering fire as they fell back and coordinated elements. She remained at the perimeter, directing the final phase of the extraction until every Marine was moving toward the helicopters. Staff Sergeant Wilson was the last to disengage, falling back beside her as they covered the final distance. To the waiting Black Hawks, everyone accounted for, Lieutenant, he confirmed as they reached the aircraft. The helicopters lifted off under increasingly heavy fire, banking sharply away from the village and accelerating toward the safety of the mountains. Inside, Maya moved among the rescued civilians, providing reassurance and checking the wounded. Despite the language barrier, their gratitude was unmistakable, especially from the village elder, who clasped her hand with tears in his eyes. You came when no one else would, he said through an interpreter. You risked everything for people you did not know. Maya nodded respectfully. It's what Marines do, sir. It's who we are. As the helicopters approached forward operating Base Condor, Maya prepared herself for the consequences of her decision. She had disregarded a direct order from division, had committed her entire force to an unauthorized operation, had exceeded the parameters of the mission when they discovered additional hostages. By any conventional standard, her actions warranted severe disciplinary measures, potentially including relief of command and court-martial proceedings. But Maya Rodriguez had long since learned that leadership sometimes required accepting personal risk to do what was right, regardless of potential consequences. Captain Reynolds approached as they prepared for landing. Division commander is waiting at the LZ, Lieutenant. General Palmer flew in personally when she heard what we were doing. Maya nodded, unsurprised. I'll take full responsibility, Captain. The team was following my orders. The team was following a leader they believe in, Reynolds corrected quietly. There's a difference. As the helicopters touched down, Maya was the first to exit, walking directly toward Brigadier General Rebecca Palmer, who stood waiting with a stern expression that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Maya came to attention and saluted crisply. Lieutenant Rodriguez reporting, ma'am. Mission accomplished. All hostages secure with minimal casualties. Palmer returned the salute, her expression unchanged. My office, Lieutenant. Immediately. Maya followed the general across the base, maintaining professional composure despite the gravity of her situation. Around them, the rescued civilians were being processed by medical personnel, their faces reflecting relief and gratitude that transcended language or culture. In the command center, Palmer closed the door and turned to face Maya with the full authority of her rank. You disobeyed a direct order, Lieutenant. You committed your entire force to an unauthorized operation. You exceeded mission parameters. In the field without approval. Yes, ma'am, Maya acknowledged without excuse or defense. You also, Palmer continued, her tone shifting slightly, rescued 35 civilians who would otherwise have been executed. You executed a textbook hostage extraction against a numerically superior force. You brought every Marine back without serious injury. The general's expression finally softened, revealing unexpected pride. In other words, Lieutenant Rodriguez, you did exactly what I hoped you would do when I approved your commission 6 months ago. Maya's surprise must have shown on her face because Palmer actually smiled. The order denying authorization was a test, Lieutenant. One final evaluation to confirm what I already believed about your character and judgment. A test, ma'am? Maya asked, struggling to process this unexpected turn. Palmer nodded. Leadership isn't just about following orders, Lieutenant. It's about knowing when mission and Marines must take priority over protocol. It's about having the moral courage to risk your career, to do what's right when lives hang in the balance. The general retrieved a small box from her desk drawer. The Marines need officers who understand that distinction. Officers who lead. From the front, who make difficult decisions under pressure, who put mission and people above personal interest. She opened the box, revealing Captain's bars. Your promotion to captain is effective immediately, along with command of the new multi-regional response force being established next month. The Brasset Division are calling it the Rodriguez Initiative, an elite unit specifically designed to execute the kind of mission you just completed. Maya stood momentarily speechless, the implications washing over her. 6 months after being denied even basic combat deployment, she was being given command of an unprecedented special operations unit named in her honor. The Rodriguez Initiative will draw operators from across all forward units, Palmer continued. You'll have authority to select your own personnel, develop your own tactics, and execute missions throughout the theater. In effect, Captain, you're being asked to reshape how we conduct specialized operations in this environment. Thank you, General, Maya said, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. I'm honored by the confidence you're placing in me. Palmer's expression became serious again. The confidence is well earned, Captain. Your journey over the past 2 years, from denied deployment requests to elite command, represents exactly the kind of leadership transformation the Corps needs to recognize and promote. As Maya left the general's office, she found the Marines of her task force waiting outside the command center. They came to attention as one, saluting the newly promoted captain with a precision that reflected not just military protocol, but genuine respect. Congratulations, Captain, Martinez said, speaking for the group. Word travels fast around here. Maya returned their salute with professional courtesy, but her eyes conveyed the deep appreciation she felt for their trust and support. These Marines had followed her into an unauthorized operation against overwhelming odds because they believed in her leadership. They had risked their careers alongside hers because they shared her commitment to mission and people above politics or protocol. The general just approved the formation of a new multi-regional response force, she informed them. I've been given command and authority to select personnel. The team exchanged glances, understanding the significance of this development. Such a unit would operate across traditional boundaries, responding to critical situations throughout the theater with unprecedented autonomy and capabilities. The first mission of the response force, Maya continued, will be to identify and train additional teams using the operational model we've developed. We're being asked to reshape special operations across the region. Martinez grinned. So basically, they're asking us to teach everyone else how to conduct Rodriguez specials. The team laughed, but the pride in their expressions was unmistakable. They had been part of something unprecedented, a leadership evolution that had transformed not just their own unit, but potentially the entire approach to special operations in the theater. As the team dispersed to process the rescued civilians and prepare after-action reports, Maya took a moment to absorb the full significance of what had transpired. 2 years ago, she had been systematically denied the opportunity to serve in combat roles she was eminently qualified for. That being steady is more valuable than being flashy, that preparation beats improvisation, and that the quiet professionals often make the loudest impact. That evening, as the carrier steamed through calm seas under clear skies, Maya stood alone on the LSO platform, remembering the hurricane conditions that had changed the course of her career. So much had changed since that day: new technology, new aircraft, new geopolitical challenges, but the fundamental principles she had championed remained constant. Excellence required preparation. Preparation required discipline. Discipline required the courage to prioritize substance over style, even when doing so meant being overlooked or underestimated. A young LSO approached hesitantly, clearly nervous about interrupting her thoughts. "Captain Patel, I just wanted to say thank you. Your protocols saved my brother's life last year during Operation Northern Light. He was piloting an F-35 when they hit unexpected weather over the Norwegian Sea." Maya smiled warmly. "I'm glad he made it home safely, Lieutenant. But I didn't save him. The LSO who guided him to recovery did." He says the LSO kept repeating something you taught them. "Focus on the next 60 seconds, not the last 30. Maya nodded, recognizing one of her fundamental principles. In crisis situations, dwelling on past mistakes only compounded the danger. What mattered was clear-eyed focus on the immediate challenge. Your brother made it back because he trusted his training and his LSO. That's how the system is supposed to work." As the lieutenant returned to his duties, Maya reflected on all the lives touched by the principle she had championed, not just the dramatic rescues during hurricane recovery and Operation Steadfast Mercy, but the countless routine recoveries, made safer through better preparation and training. The next morning, as Maya prepared to depart the carrier via COD aircraft, Admiral Reichert approached with unexpected news. "The Secretary of the Navy has approved your nomination for flag rank, Captain. You'll be pinning on your first star next month as the youngest female Rear Admiral in naval aviation history." Maya felt a moment of profound gratitude mixed with a sense of responsibility that nearly overwhelmed her. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored by the confidence the Navy has placed in me." "It's not about confidence, Maya," Reichert said, using her first name for the first time in their professional relationship. "It's about results. What you've accomplished has transformed naval aviation in ways that will save lives for generations to come." As the COD aircraft carried her away from the carrier, Maya watched the massive ship grow smaller on the horizon. 20 years ago, as a newly commissioned officer, she could never have imagined the path her career would take from overlooked LSO to the architect of a fundamental shift in naval aviation culture. She had never sought advancement through self-promotion or political maneuvering. Instead, she had focused on mastering her craft, on being ready when readiness mattered most. And in doing so, she had risen further than she ever could have through traditional channels. Back at Pensacola, Maya found a new class of students waiting, the next generation of naval aviators, who would carry her principles forward. As she looked out at their eager faces, she recognized the awesome responsibility of shaping not just their skills, but their values. "Naval aviation has always celebrated its heroes," she began. "The test pilots who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The combat pilots who demonstrated incredible courage under fire. The pioneers who transformed theory into practice." She paused, making eye contact with individual students around the room. "But today, I want to talk about a different kind of heroism, the quiet dedication of being thoroughly prepared for whatever challenges you might face. It's not glamorous. It doesn't make for exciting stories at the officers' club, But when lives hang in the balance, when split-second decisions determine whether pilots return to their families, it's the foundation upon which everything else depends. One student raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, how do we balance thoroughness with the need for speed in combat situations?" It was the question that had defined the cultural tension in naval aviation for generations, the perceived trade-off between careful preparation and rapid execution. That's the false dichotomy that nearly cost lives during the hurricane recovery. Maya replied, "Thoroughness doesn't slow you down in a crisis, it speeds you up. When procedures are second nature, when contingencies are already planned, when your responses are automatic through deliberate practice, that's when you can act decisively without hesitation." She gestured toward the window where training aircraft could be seen practicing approaches. Every pilot out there wants to be the best, the fastest, the most skilled, the most daring. But the truly exceptional aviators understand that excellence isn't about individual moments of brilliance. It's about consistent performance under the most challenging conditions imaginable. After the lecture, as Maya walked back to her office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the lonely LSO platform during the hurricane recovery, to the podium addressing future naval aviation leaders, each step had reinforced the same fundamental truth. In a world that often confused noise with substance and flash with competence, there would always be a place for the quiet professional who was ready when ready mattered most. That evening, she opened her journal to a fresh page and wrote, "As I prepare to accept flag rank, I find myself thinking not about the recognition or the accomplishments, but about the responsibility that comes with influence, the principles that guided me on that storm-tossed LSO platform must now guide an entire generation of naval aviators. The lesson remains the same: be thorough when others are hasty. Be prepared when others are cavalier. Be steady when chaos erupts around you." For in naval aviation, as in life, it's not about who gets the credit, it's about who brings everyone home safely. Outside her window, the sun set over Pensacola Bay, casting long shadows across the cradle of naval aviation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new technologies, new threats to navigate. But the fundamental principles Maya had championed would remain as relevant as ever. In a profession that had always celebrated its daredevils and risk-takers, she had carved out a legacy based on something far more enduring: the quiet, consistent excellence that comes from being thoroughly prepared for whatever challenges might arise. And in doing so, she had transformed not just her own career, but the very culture of naval aviation itself. Steady as she goes. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become part of our everyday life stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.